All right, welcome back. We are here to discuss part six of The Return. Maybe one of the most devastating episodes to watch, but also one of the most hilarious episodes to watch at the same time. What do you guys think?
Yeah, this one has some of my favorite moments. It has like probably the most painful piece to watch.
Yeah,
But also, the way Lynch handles uh, it all is just, and the tone shifts in this episode. It just really was remarkable watching it self-contained in one viewing. I was struck by just how gracefully he handles all of that.
I would have to agree. I
Absolutely.
think you could probably say the single most devastating moment of the return, maybe even of all Twin Peaks, honestly, is in this episode. But at the same time, like it's really also some of my favorite, like funniest moments in the season are here. Just some of my favorite moments in the season are here. And even that moment, as horrific as it is so beautifully done, especially by the work that Harry Dean Stanton puts in that moment. So we'll get to that. But this is a really solid episode of television. It just really is from top to bottom. It's all things you love about Twin Peaks. It continues to push for me. It continues to have my narrative of that the best stuff in the season. Hello.
Okay. We heard most of that. I think part of you cut out a little bit.
I don't know what happened. That's so weird. Well, we have like really bad wind here. Like we've had like tornado warnings throughout the day, so that could be having some impact there. But like I said, I think the episode has, the horrible moment that we're going to talk about is so beautifully handled in the performances and the music and everything about it, that it's a moment of sadness, but there's real empathy in that moment, for a character that we don't even know that much about. But the significance of the impact and everything there, it's amazing how much empathy there is in this moment. So again, though, my rule stands with this season of television that all of my favorite stuff is the stuff in Las Vegas. So there's absolutely no change in that with this episode as well.
Well, we'll get into it, but I think one of the things, if we talk about the Harry Dean Stanton character that you mentioned earlier, Kevin, is he's another one of those Twin Peak residents that has a connection to the other
Yeah.
side
Yes.
that that it
We see
wasn't
him in Fire
necessarily
Walk with
given
You.
in as
Right.
much.
Right. In Fire Walk with You, he talks about that he's been places, you know. And if you read the companion books to this that Mark Frost put out, the Secret Dossier and then the Final Dossier, there is a lot about, in particular, Carl Rod and the Log Lady, and how they were abducted by aliens and like weird stuff happened. Like there is precedence there that these people are on a different wavelength than everybody else. And in that moment of passage that we'll get to, there are hints there that Carl sees things that nobody else can see, kind of stuff. And I really appreciate that. So, I mean, he's definitely been touched by the entities. I would say more of the White Lodge than the Black Lodge. I feel like he's had
Mhm.
some shine put on him from them. And if you look at the way he acts towards everyone, I think there's a reason for that. I think they see him as a good vessel, basically, a good human being. And so I think he's been touched more of the positive side of the veil than the negative.
Well, and one of the things, I think you're right, 100% on that with the talking about the White Lodge stuff. I was actually reflecting this time, wondering, thinking about him being present at, where Teresa Banks was, seeing
Yeah.
him be present in this moment. I'm wondering if, we now know that the fireman, manipulates or puts people into certain places, I'm wondering if he is, being put into place a little bit to be, to be there for some reason that,
I think that's very valid. Again, as we talk about all things Lynch, if you think that's what it is, then you're right. You know what I mean? Like you're not wrong. And I think there is real validity in that statement. I think looking at, how Carl takes care of everybody at the original Fat Trout Trailer Park and Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, and how he's still, the big man on campus at the new, as it's actually labeled on the sign, the new Fat Trout Trailer Park. He definitely, the way he acts towards his fellow residents and stuff as well. Carl Rod is a real one. Like he is a real, genuine, sympathetic human being. And it makes perfect sense that the fireman, now that as we'll get later on into the season, the fireman definitely works with good people. And one of our favorite people in the Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department gets to be a part of that as well. So we know that the fireman definitely knows how to pick the good ones. And I think Carl Rod is definitely one of them. So, Colin, I think that is a very valid statement. I think it makes perfect sense to me that, the White Lodge, just like the Black Lodge, the White Lodge is always in play. They're always making their moves as well. So in this eternal game of chess, they're making their moves as well. And I don't think Carl's a pawn. I think he's more of a knight or a bishop. I think he's got higher status than he's a pawn. But he's definitely part of their game. I thoroughly believe that.
Yeah, I think that he, sort of comes in and out of the narrative. I mean, very briefly here and in Fire Walk with Me. And, it's interesting to see that choice that Lynch made with him there. I think we should just talk about the scene because I think, as I put on the episode, I think for people who've seen it, obviously this scene weighs really heavily over the episode. Sure. And so, let's get it out of the way so we can talk about the other stuff too. But so much is going on in this scene, right? So there's those bits with Carl there, and I mean, certainly he's there in a lot of ways. Helps us as the audience process what we're seeing too, because the scene is brutal. Like I had forgotten, like I remembered that it was going to be a difficult watch, but I'd forgotten just how brutal a scene it is. Like,
and this also does a great job of setting up Richard Horn. Which I mean, like definitely you have to set up your bad guys, and Jesus, does this scene truly set him up? And this moment has ramifications throughout the season. But yeah, so now we know about Richard Horn. He's come into play, and he's introduced, really he's put into this position by Red.
Yeah.
So nice
another great scene.
That's like a little bit of comedy too, though. Balthazar Getty's just cooking in that scene.
The dime and how it just disappears and shit. Yeah, I mean, like there's some Black Lodge power there, as far as I'm concerned. That shit's weird. Like it's an odd scene.
And we're used to Balthazar Getty being weird in David Lynch stuff, so it it plays again. If we think about our connected universe theories and stuff like,
well, we've talked about Lost Highway. There's entities of the Black Lodge that would definitely fit into that, and the Mystery Man would fit into the Black Lodge. So but you get Balthazar Getty.
I was going to say, interesting about that scene with Balthazar Getty, and it does lead into this scene, so I think it's a good one to talk about, is how I'd completely forgotten about it. It is such a great scene, and it does so much, and it's so entertaining, but because the rest of the episode has so much more going on, it's easy to get lost. Like, there's so much going on that some parts get lost, unfortunately, for me. And it was great to be reminded of that scene, because it's a beautiful little moment that, you're right, is getting things set up, and it just shows you talked about setting up the bad guys, and it really got me thinking about Richard Horn and what a completely chaotic bad guy he is, and a really pathetic one as well.
Yeah, because he's so butthurt by Balthazar Getty calling him kid, and but he is a kid to this guy, because this guy's like a professional criminal. He's like been doing this forever. He's like, this kid's gonna deliver whatever he's delivering on the truck for me. And so, he's like, Richard is the most despicable. Yet we don't even know that's his name yet. I don't think. Do we? Do we know he's Richard?
That's a good question.
Now,
I don't think we have. No, I think this might be an introduction.
I mean, this places him as the most despicable, evil person thing in Twin Peaks. But part of it is because he's so pathetically upset about how Balthazar Getty was treating him.
He's
because he wants to be taken so seriously as the bad guy. you know,
He's
like
so
be
not, yeah.
respected.
Yeah. But it also, I think this scene in the sequence that follows also goes to show like that dark underbelly now that has really festered in Twin Peaks, that it is far worse than what it was before. And it was bad before. Okay, we know that, but it's far worse now. There are more agents in play, and it's not just coming across the border anymore. It's boiling right there in the town itself, man. It's very Blue Velvet, that whole like scratching underneath the surface. Only you don't have to scratch far at all. It's like literally right there in plain sight. And this is definitely showing us that again, like I said, the phrase for this series is you can't go home again. Like, and it really is very much setting up the darkness that is there. It is not the same Twin Peaks. It is far worse than you remembered. And that's pretty rough. So we have the setup now with, and again, maybe he hasn't been named yet. And now that I think about it, he might just be referred to as Richard. I don't know if we know his last name. And it might be the next episode that we finally put that together. But we know at least, in the grand scheme of things, we know Richard Horne is now in play. Right. And this delivery that he has to make in this crappy truck, ends up taking a horrific and brutal turn, as he is just in his basically coked out manner trying to get this stuff delivered and being all in his feelings about being called a kid and all that bullshit that he has with him. This weak man ends up committing a horrific crime in broad daylight, with plenty of witnesses.
Yeah, there's like a good chunk of the town's there.
Yeah, zero remorse.
Yep.
Like zero empathy, blaming it on the victim for being in the way. Like, what a weak, horrible person he is. And I really do think this scene does a great job of, if Lynch wants us to hate this guy, boy, you really don't have to do much more than have him hit an innocent child in front of his mother.
And act the way he does about it.
Yeah.
And then not only that, you get the cutaway because they're playing, and that's where Carl sees them first in the park because he's sitting there enjoying his smoke and his coffee, as David Lynch would. And they're about to cross the street, and this other truck driver's like, "It's a red light, go ahead." And you see
he's waving them over,
And you see after that happens, like that truck driver's like, "Oh my god!" Like he's kind of blaming himself, like even though he didn't do anything. Like to him, it because Richard comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's awful. And as someone who's lost a child, that scene always hits me hard every time I watch it. It is the worst fucking pain that you could ever imagine. I would never wish it on my worst enemy on my worst day. And I will say that the mother in that sequence. Her screams will fucking haunt you for the rest of your days, man. Like they are as haunting as anything Cheryl Lee has ever bumped out as Laura Palmer. They are so guttural and so real, and that moment is so. It's weird to say it's a beautiful moment, but it is when, in the grand scheme of the direction, the performance, the music, everything culminates in this really powerful moment. That what I guess where the beautiful comes into it is that it is not done for shock value. It's not overly graphic for shock value. It is meant to evoke a reaction, of course, but it is not in any way, shape, or form trying to cheapen the action with like excess gore and body parts and splatter and all that shit. There's none of that. It's very, very carefully done, very tastefully done, but it's still going to rip your fucking heart out every time you watch it. But what I always found interesting in the moment is because going all the way back to Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me and the way that Lynch really keys us in on the and the electricity and the power lines at the trailer park is that as Carl is watching everything happen, he basically sees the electric energy, like the soul of that child, leave his body. At that point, knowing that this child is past, there's no hope. There's no maybe he'll make he's gone. But it's very much like he's going up by the electric pole, and it's that whole thing of like kind of tying it into that mythos of like maybe the White Lodge and the Black Lodge is where we end up. in the grand scheme of things. Maybe there is no heaven or hell. Maybe it's the White Lodge and the Black Lodge, but that he does see, like he is able to physically see that energy leave the child's body. And it's such a powerful.
And the connection to the electricity images that Lynch has been,
he's been building it up for forever. Yeah. And it's, again,
especially in Fire Walk with Me, where again, the electric poles in the trailer park where that connect to Carl. So it's all pulling it together there in that moment. And again, Carl is able to provide some solace and peace to us as the observers, as we're watching that moment, because it is such a hard moment. It is, but it's accomplishing so much in like so many different threads are being brought together and accomplished there. And if I'm correct, is this is also connected to this intersection is connected to the moment in Fire Walk with Me as well, isn't it?
I think it is.
Yeah. So there's so many connections happening in a scene that is mostly involving characters that we don't know or have very little
we'll never see
connection
them
with.
again, with the exception of Carl.
Yeah, exactly. And Richard. But
Richard, of course, yeah.
But it's and it is showing Twin Peaks to be the bigger town than we remember it to be. Like there's just so much more of it that we get to see now. So I appreciate that. But as the scene was approaching, I started to feel my guts. I started to feel my, heart beating and just knowing where it was going. And again, just the beauty with which he handles such an important and yet difficult moment that most narratives avoid these kind of scenes because they're just too challenging for audiences, regardless of, and yet he takes it on, he handles it so well, so beautifully. And again, it is an important part of the narrative. Watching it the first time, we don't know yet where this is taking us, but it is all connected to important things that are coming.
Mm-hmm. Sorry,
no,
I was just gonna say, I think it shows exactly how despicable Richard is as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
From that visceral, and it also shows you just how like Kevin was saying, just how the darkness has kind of taken Twin Peaks, but at the same time showing you that there is good and light in this world. And like you were saying, Colin, you think Carl was there for a reason. I think it's so he can not only see that, but also because he's kind of there to comfort the mother as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like as best he can.
It reminds us that there's still good in the town as well.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. That as horrible as it's gotten, there is still that ever-present goodness. And it may be sometimes harder to find, but it's always there. And I think it's one of those kind of beautiful things to think about that. Yes, that darkness is growing, and yes, it's there, but at the same time, that goodness is always there too. There has to be that sort of balance in some ways. And maybe it's a little bit out of whack right now, but in the grand scheme of things, it's going to hopefully balance out. But it is nice to see that there is that goodness, and Carl definitely is a part of that. There are moments with Carl later on in the season that I just love as well. When we see more about him, there's an episode where he's more prevalent in it. And it's such a great episode. And there's so much more about Carl that you can learn, just who he is, how he works. He's awesome. He's such a great character, and it's so great to have Harry Dean Stanton for one last. This ends up being, I think, his last performance. So it's nice to have him for one more ride with David Lynch, and to see him bring back Carl and give Carl a really great send off, and he does a great job with it. This being his first scene really back into it in The Return. It's like Harry Dean Stanton's just one of those actors, man. He's an actor's actor. He's not, he doesn't have the ego and all that shit. He just wants to get in and work, and he does great work in this sequence.
And it also, again, just legitimizes that Fire Walk with Me is part of this universe. It's not
I keep telling everybody, this felt like it was Lynch's way of saying, I'm going to make you all like this movie more, and I'm going to make you all respect it more, because I'm going to make it the pun fully intended, linchpin of this season. Like I'm absolutely going to have more weight than anything from those first 2 seasons of the show ever will.
Well, and this also reminded me with just again how he definitely handles the tonal shifts in this, because there's another brutal death in this episode that is handled in a completely different
way.
Yeah.
Like very humorous, very just I mean brutal. Again, I'd forgotten that. Oh my God, this scene is way more bloody than I
But
remember.
there's also a bit of that weird Lynch comedy, because if you talk about the hitman killing, he's in there brutally murdering people with that ice pick, and then he bends it, and he's like, "Oh,"
and I hadn't
he's sad.
It connected to me exactly. It connected to me a little bit to the scene that I love in Mulholland Drive with the killer who keeps having to kill somebody else, and it sort of was reminiscent of that, but in a very different way. Like this killer is presented in a way that's humorous but also scary, like intimidating, right? Like this is to set up that there's a threat coming for Dougie, is what this scene is, right?
Yes.
And so but it's done in a way that creates an ominous threat, like you're worried about this killer because he seems to be really psychopathic and dangerous.
Well,
but
it's also the interesting thing of him being a little person. Like, you would not think that he's going to be running into a room and just being like the most dangerous person in the room, and yet he absolutely is. Lives up to the name of Ike the Spike, and he even has his own little theme song and everything. Dude. He's real, man. He is real, and I love his addition to this. It's again the criminal underworld that Lynch has in his films, like from Mulholland Drive to this. There's so many odd, weird, quirky characters that you would not mentally think of when you're thinking of making like your mafia style underworld. Right. And I love how just all over the place it is, and it's absolutely fantastic. Ike the Spike is definitely one of my favorite.
Getting sad about his ice pick, it was great. It's such a great moment, but again, really brutal, but played for a completely different way.
Yeah,
exactly.
And you're right; it is very reminiscent of the Hitman in Mulholland Drive. The first time I saw it, that was actually what I thought. I was like, "Oh God, that's that same sort of vibe," and it's hilarious. Yeah.
It's so funny how the criminals in a Lynch film feel like they could be in a Coen Brothers movie.
Yes,
too.
it does feel very Coen Brothers, maybe even a little Tarantino, but just on a different level. And just so, and it creates this. Now we've got this this threat is coming for Dougie, and the Dougie scenes in this episode that it starts it off are so good. Him being brought home. His
Jade
interaction with Janie
man.
is
That's all I'm
so
saying.
good.
I bet she did.
I love Naomi Watts in this.
We just take a moment to talk about the absolute genius that is Janie E. Like, she is so without a doubt one of my favorite things in the season. Naomi Watts doing the Lord's work in this season, man. Like, God, she is putting in the overtime, man. She's phenomenal.
Talk about dumb criminals. When those guys go to meet her thinking they're going to intimidate her by the money Dougie owes, and she just chews into them about just everything.
And the fact that it's at a playground makes it even funnier, dude. Like, it's just like the most ridiculous setup.
And she gives them the $25,000, and all they can say is "thank you."
Like, it's so funny to watch her basically scold them like a teacher. Like, it's so funny. And again, all of my favorite moments in this whole season are in Las Vegas. That includes like the Spike, and that definitely includes everything with Janie E and Dougie. My God in heaven, like
and also Watts, the moment with between Dougie and his son too. Like, you're starting to see
it's so sweet.
It is like this thing, like,
Sonny
I love
Jim
this arc of Dougie's, like, create like basically this family that has been going through what they, because of who Dougie was before, and now he's this other person, and suddenly there's this whole like change in who they all are and how they're going to rate. That has such a great payoff at the end. But this, we're starting to see it here, and that scene with him with Sonny Jim, is so good. It's just so sweet. The scene at the table because Janie E is still so angry and so filled with all of her rage and frustration, and Naomi Watts gives such life to all of that. And we're gonna get to see her let some of that go over the course of it.
Yes.
But it's her arc is like it's just the beginning of what like seeing all this happening just made me so happy to see all of this happening. And that moment,
Everything with them. Everything.
yeah, that
It's
moment
all
with
great.
the criminals, her paying them off, is one of the most memorable moments of the whole season. It's
But I mean, the whole scene when the cops bring him home and she says, and they're like, he seems a little disorientated, and she's like, a good day. You know, us talking about Dougie being a Popa for either Cooper or the Man in Black makes you think maybe Dougie's had episodes where he acted strange before, where he's not acting fully human.
I imagine he probably did.
Yeah,
based on what other people
the way
have said.
everybody reacts to him, like that has to be in the cards because he is
Yeah.
a Tulpa, or well, that version of Dougie was a Tulpa of Mr. C, like straight
Right.
fact, no questions asked.
Right.
He was absolutely a Tulpa of Mr. C. This is something different. This is something that really shouldn't exist, but it's still like I told you, like we talked about before. It's Agent Cooper. It's Cooper in his essence of goodness, basically stripped down, basically.
Yeah.
But it is still Cooper. And if you think about it, like I talked about, like all the things he does in this season are all the good Dale riding the ship for everybody involved in the Dougie world, like in the universe that is everybody connected to Dougie Jones. Cooper, it's like whether he realizes it or not, he is riding the ship for literally everyone in that world. We start with this episode with Bushnell.
Yes.
Okay, like and I
don't know how Bushnell connected the dots with those things, because at first he's like, "What the hell are these scribbles?" And then he starts looking at them, and then he's like, "Oh."
And I love that. All right, already Cooper Dougie is cleaning up Dougie's act, is also fixing up Tom Sizemore's lying and cheating from the company, okay, and is already making right with Bushnell. So it's like everything starts here, and I love Bushnell. He ends up being one of my favorite characters in the season. He is such a good man, like such a good man, and you see that as the episodes go on, and the more you see of Bushnell, the more you love that character. Towards like at the end, I just want to like hang out with that man. I just want to give that man a big hug and sit down and have a beer with him and just hear his boxing stories. You know, like he's such a great character. I love everything about him. I love everybody in that office. They're all wonderful. And we still don't get to my favorite characters, the Mitchums, yet. We're still not even really with them. So, and they will all tie into this as well, which I love. But I love the fact that it is these cryptic, weird drawings that somehow the Lodge makes Dougie draw. Like you see those little sparks of light, and he's just making little ladders and shit. Like I don't know what it is. It's great, but I love somehow that Bushnell's able to see it and decode it, and it's like, oh my god, thank you.
You know what that reminded me of, because there's a bit of sort of nonsense involved in that, and it reminded me of the cave drawings from the season 2, and how in reality they didn't really mean anything, or like but the series made meaning out of them. It sort of felt similar to that, and it was almost I don't know if there was any intention there, but there was just this like, you know, finding meaning in the chaos. Was,
I mean, like I figure like on set, David Lynch is just like, just draw whatever you want, Kale. Just make weird symbols. We'll all make sense of it in the end. Like I just feel like that was the direction. And so Kyle's like, all right, here we go.
I think that's 100% what it was. Speaking of characters that we don't get to really see, but just get a tease of, I remember I was so excited when Miguel Ferrer goes into the bar, which I never noticed has a sign that is very reminiscent of the Roadhouse. I had never connected that before.
I've never even thought about that shit. No,
but oh my god, when he walks past the sign, the neon sign, and I'm like, that is so reminiscent of the Bang
Also,
Bang sign.
Just great comedy for Miguel Ferrer.
Yeah,
fuck you, Gene Kelly.
And David Lynch, of course, making references to classic Hollywood films, of course. But, but when he says her name and she turns around and we get to see Dan, I remember just being, as a Twin Peaks fan, being giddy with excitement. And that's all we get this episode. That's it. We just get to see her. And of course, the fact that it's Laura Dern.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because of Laura Dern's role
with
in
her
Lynch
colorful hair and
world.
her candy-coated fingernails. Yeah, dude. Like,
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like we
When I
know
heard
this
she was
is someone
cast in it,
important.
I knew when she was cast, I was like, well, man, if like she's got to be a big deal. Lynch isn't going to put her in it if she's not like a major character. And as soon as they start talking about Diane, like I was like, okay, there is no way in hell it's not Laura Dern. Like
Right.
there is no way in hell it's not her. So when they get to that bar and she turns around, I was like, yep,
Yeah.
called that
Yeah,
shit.
I think-
I'm here for it. Let's roll. Let's rock.
I think my reaction was, of course she's Diane. Who else would it
Who
have
else could
been?
she be? Exactly. Like it needed to be somebody big like that for sure.
Yeah.
And Laura Dern, absolutely, even though in that one turn, she's already oozing the energy of that character. And she ends up turning in one of the best performances. Not only of her
for
career,
me,
but
the
of
fact that
entire
she didn't
return.
win Best Supporting Actress Emmy for this was a crime because, oh my God, she was easily the best supporting actor
really,
in any show that year.
Yeah, she really goes from real places.
I mean, good for her though. I mean, this was part of her having a whole sort of career renaissance. Like around
this is kind of
a whole bunch of things. She got an Oscar nomination for her film that year. There was a whole bunch of things going on for her, and I'm just so glad. Like she so well deserves it. She's one of those I've talked before about the whole Nepo baby thing, and it's not that Nepo babies can't be really talented to deserve it. It's that they get the chances to do it that other people who are just as good and just as talented get. But she is an example of a Nepo baby who totally has become her own legend in itself. And I adore Laura Dern, and I'm so glad that she plays such an amazing role here. And this is just the start. We get one glimpse of her, and that's it.
Yeah.
And for Twin Peaks fans, it's Diane has been a fascination for Twin Peaks fans since the pilot. And now here she is in all her glory, finally in front of us. It was just like, what an amazing moment for Twin Peaks fans. That's all I got to say about that.
No, it was like a long time coming. And it was because there was always so much speculation. Is Diane like the name of his tape recorder? Is there really a real Diane? Like, I mean, like that was a big.
Is it just his diary that he's thinking into? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there was so many ways that people thought
the
about
only
Diane.
other glimpse we get that she might be a person is in that one scene in Fire Walk with Me, which I think is in the Missing Pieces.
It's in the Missing Pieces, so that wasn't even in the theatrical release. So still. Until you saw the Missing Pieces, you didn't know that there really was for sure.
Well, even that, he could, knowing Cooper,
he's just standing outside. Exactly. Cooper's a strange man.
I don't think that was definitive. This is the first definitive moment.
Yeah, this is the definitive proof that
technically this isn't Diane, but we'll get to that later.
Right.
But
yeah, we'll get to that. But no, this is such a solid episode. Again, some of my favorite characters are now coming into play. Everybody in the Las Vegas stuff, just outstanding. We got our first Sonny Jim, and I just love that that's like that kid's name is Sonny Jim. Like that is, they call him that every single time. Like it's amazing. So I
who
love
names their kids Jenny E?
Who names their kids Sonny Jim?
Yeah.
Janie E is that kind of person, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And Janie E, of course, is. I mean, goddamn, dude! Like we could write sonnets about how wonderful Naomi Watts is in this season. Like, I mean, honest to God, it's hard to pick my favorite person outside of the Mitchum brothers because they really do steal the show for me. They are phenomenal. But outside of them, Janie E might be my favorite character in the Las Vegas connection. She's so fantastic, and. I mean, Naomi Watts not only got the assignment, dude, she got an A+, man. Like she's so effortlessly good in this role. The righteous indignation that she dresses those guys down with, phenomenal. Like it's phenomenal. And if you weren't in love with the character, like right there, I don't know what to tell you because she's amazing. Like she's just amazing.
Those criminals are done. They're not coming after Dougie for anything.
No,
they're done.
No, they're too scared now. Yeah, shit, dude. Like they got their money good, man. We're out.
What is that one actor's name? because he's been in a lot of things.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about now. I just can't think of it off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, it's a great scene. It's one of the most memorable.
Oh, I forgot, dude. We got one.
Jeremy Davies. Jeremy Davies. He plays
Jeremy
such
Davies,
a good.
He was on Lost. Yeah, he was on Lost.
Yeah, he plays such a good sleaze bag.
He does.
Like,
Yeah.
He's got that look.
An idiot sleaze bag too. Like, he's so good at that.
But we forgot. We got one more thing at the end, and that we go back to the sheriff's department for one final moment. And Hawk coming through. Dropping.
I love that he gets to be the main investigator through all this. I love that he's like.
Yeah, and so now all of a sudden in the bathroom stall door, we find.
Yeah, but first he tells Chad off, which is very.
Yes, excellent, because fuck Chad.
Yes,
fuck
Chad.
Yeah.
I think we need to say that every episode. Fuck Chad.
Every episode.
Sure.
Which I think is funny. He's like, I'm going to tell the sheriff. Hawk's like, you go do that, Chad.
Yeah, you go right ahead. But no, I love that Hawk is still like an investigator, that he's still, got that tracker ability about himself. Like he's finding shit, making it happen. And then, of course, we find these missing pages from the diary, which are in canon. I mean, there are missing pages. If you even have the copy of the diary book, there are areas where it says page ripped out or page missing. So this is like canon. This is fully established from all the way back in the first season of the show. So it's really cool. Again, the payoffs that we're getting in this season are amazing. Not only Diane, but now the missing pages of Laura Palmer's diary. And this is like one of those moments when it happened in the show. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, we're finally here. Like, we're getting these pages. Like, holy shit. I was like gobsmacked.
We were talking about how he's pulled in some stuff from Fire Walk with Me, but he's pulling in stuff from season 1 of too. Heidi is in this episode.
Heidi, I know, God fucking
yeah.
I was like, yay. And she still has that laugh, that perfect little laugh.
Yeah, and that ties in. It's not just there for like they connect this other character that sees Richard, that witnesses the Richard do the thing. So there's all like it's all there for reasons, not just fan service, not just for I'm going to throw in this moment where we get to see so and so. But Heidi, you know who she is right away because he has her do that laugh.
Same thing.
And
it's the exact same framing of her original, like everything is the exact same. Of the 2 times that she shows up in Twin Peaks episodes 1 and 2, it's the framing of the door, her coming in with her little shawl and her little laugh, and they're like, you're late, and she has her little laugh. Like, it's the exact same framing. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. But she does have a purpose for being there.
Yeah, she does have purpose. It sets up this other character who we're going to see have like important stuff coming down the road. But we've got, the pages, like going back to what you were saying, like it's connecting us back to the
very beginning.
As well, like the show feels in this episode very integrated. Like I said, we talked about the references to Fire Walk with Me. We're now seeing references to the original series, so it feels very connected. Like so many times we think about season 3 or The Return as being, such a different beast, and it is. But there is such.
It is, but it isn't. Yeah.
Exactly.
This is one of the episodes. Like it's about around here. That I remember when I was watching it the first time, I remember thinking to myself, now it's starting to feel like Twin Peaks. Like there's a little bit of that cognitive dissonance in the first 2 episodes because it is like setting because you're not
in
really
New York and Vegas. And
you're all over the place. Like I don't know who these people are, where these like why are they important? Like how does this all connect? And so you're just kind of like you're discombobulated in a lot of ways. But then once it starts going into, you're like, okay, everything has a purpose. Every place has a purpose. Everything has a point. And it's about right around episodes 5 and 6 where it really starts feeling like Twin Peaks. And, it's one of those things like every time you go back and watch it, it starts feeling more like Twin Peaks earlier and earlier and earlier because you know where it's going.
You see the connections.
You're already putting together the pieces of where it's all going to line up. And you're like, oh shit, that's right. That's going to lead into this and that's going to lead into that. And it's really rewarding to go back and rewatch it. Honestly, I like it better like the second time through. Now on my third time through, I like it more the more I go back and rewatch it. It's and that's good television. That's what Twin Peaks seasons 1 and 2 do for me. That's what The Return does for me. And again, we will talk about this more as we get into some of the more upcoming episodes. But it becomes so epic, like there is just so much at stake and so much connectivity. It's really amazing how epic this ends up becoming when you start looking at time and space and everything in between. This is an epic season of television, and it takes Twin Peaks from this little town, in northeastern, United States, into something far more global, something far more transdimensional, something just far more epic. And I really love that we got a chance for Lynch and Frost to have basically carte blanche. Do what you want to do. Make the show you've always wanted to make. There are no censors. There's no ratings. There's no limit to your budget, basically. Just do what you want to do. Here's the bankroll. Go make it. And I love that we're getting such unfiltered, David Lynch and Mark Frost in this season.
Because they didn't have that outside of maybe the pilot. They didn't have that for the rest of the original.
No, because they had to adhere to the standards of ABC and network television. Yeah.
Yep.
And then I'm just gonna say, in our, especially at the point this comes out in the IP-driven entertainment, and not only are we trying to adapt things and make franchises, we're also trying to do these legacy sequels things. Yeah. I think this is a legacy thing done well, because it's not just you're not just connecting things from the previous thing and also trying to do, but there's no hey guys, remember how great this was, and you remember that scene in season 2. It's just no, I'm going to connect it, but I'm also going to do something different.
Yeah,
and it's going to grow from what it was.
It's not trying to remake Twin Peaks season 1, which would have been what anyone else, a lesser person, would have been all right, let's just go back to the beginning. Let's go back to the double R and all that good stuff, like cherry pie and coffee, and we're going to do all that. And it would have been shit. This is something far better because it's expansion, right? Again, even through the seasons of Twin Peaks, the original 2 seasons, it kept feeling bigger, right? It wasn't just this little town. There were interdimensional things in play. There were alternate realities, all this craziness, right? We didn't really quite know where it was all going, but it was there. And like I said, with the return, you finally get that epic sense of what the world was that Lynch and Frost were creating. There is something so much bigger, something so much richer. And I really love the fact that, again, it's the idea of you can't go home again, and we're not going to try to. It would be fruitless and pointless to just remake seasons 1 and 2. Right. Let's take it to the next level. 25 years have passed. What would have happened in that time? What would the town look like? What would these people look like? What would their lives be? And I love the fact that that's what they were able to do.
I think a really good example of that is the scenes in this episode with the police station, because our memories of the police staff are very specific from the first 2 seasons, and it felt like a very small organization. Yes. There was other officers sometimes you would see in the background, but they would. Right. But now the show is really focusing that their police department has grown. Yes. And we're seeing much more interaction. There is the scene again. We're establishing that Chad is a big jerk, but it's it's also establishing that this isn't the police station that it used to be. It's changed. It's now something different. And it operates differently, and it's not what it used to be. And I think that's this episode shows some of that. We're also getting, there is a discussion about cherry pie, a similar kind of discussion in the double R that there used to be with, the cute, catchphrases things. And here again, we have a character doing that again, but it's expanded because she's, talking about stopping it. It feels like, and we'll find out more. The double R has grown as well. We haven't gotten there yet, but it does feel like there's these connections, and there's also the changes, and which feels very real. Feels very real because that's how life actually goes. If you ever go back and visit your hometown, you recognize that there are things that feel the same, and there's a lot that feels completely different. And I think that's what the return is capturing in some of these scenes.
Some things don't change, and some things change completely and don't look the same. But I love that we also get a little bit about this Sheriff Truman's background, because we
Yes.
have a scene with the wife, and
Yeah.
she's upset about the leak, or no, it's her dad's car not being fixed, and Frank's like, well, you're telling me, and and then we find out that they have a tragedy in their life, and this probably explains the wife's behavior a little bit because she's grieving, and of course it just solidifies Chad's a jerk again because he has no sympathy for
None.
that.
Yeah. There's I was
is
reflecting on this watching this episode too, the way that Lynch is commenting on different kinds of masculinity throughout this series, like he's positioning different kinds of different kinds of strengths and aggression and other sorts of and empathy, and we're seeing the characters of Hawk and Chad be contrasted. We saw Richard Horne's and the criminal underworld's behavior compared to sort of contrasted with Carl Rod, right? Like we're seeing these, Lynch seems very interested in these themes as he's going through this series a little bit, and it really sort of felt and I mean, so much of that is the story of Cooper and being split into these different versions, right? To me, so much of The Return is about exploring masculinity in its different forms and the different the different ways it can manifest, if that makes sense.
No, it's definitely, we've talked about it many a time, how he really does allow the women of Twin Peaks to be the strongest characters in the entire universe of it. And that continues to be the case here. I mean, Janie E steps up into the pantheon
and takes care of Dougie's business.
Yeah, exactly. So that continues to be the case. And I appreciate that Dougie ends up being the person doing the most good, and he's not hyper masculine.
Yes.
He's not hyper anything. He's kind of disconnected in a lot of ways, but there is a natural empathy in his character, which is why he's doing these things to help people out. We see it in the first scene with Sonny Jim. We see it in every scene that he has with Sonny Jim. There's really just beautiful moments to do it in. But it's really interesting that the tough guys are usually the worst people. Mm-hmm. It's the guys with empathy, the guys who
Sheriff Truman in this scene with his wife, for example, all the strength.
He's just very calm and patient with her, and because he loves her, and because he understands that she's not just upset because of what the thing she's complaining about. There's more to the problem, and that's why he takes her to his office as well.
Yeah.
Well, and look at Hawk with his relationship with the log lady, all those beautiful calls that we'll have with them in the season. These men have empathy. They care about others. I mean, look at the jobs they took. They took jobs to protect. They took jobs to serve. And they do that. But then, of course, there's the people who don't do that kind of work, like Chad. And then, of course, there's our horrible people like Richard and Red and these awful, awful, awful people. And there are more awful people, including Mr. C. Right. So Mr. C is also, he is toxic masculinity defined. That is exactly
absolutely.
And again, it's that splitting of Dale Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
The dark side of Dale Cooper is fully manifested in Mr. C. The light side of Dale Cooper, the innocent, childlike version of Dale Cooper, fully manifested into Dougie. And I love that because, again, the first time a lot of people watch this season, they're just like, man, I just wish we had Cooper back. And now every time I watch it, I'm like, God, he's here.
He is.
He's in there.
He's there.
He's just trying to figure it out.
But it's at the same time, when you look at how he impacts the lives of everybody in the Las Vegas contingent, he is Cooper. There is no.
Yeah, that's what Cooper would do. Yeah,
but we forget in the original, in the pilot especially, but through a lot of the original series, there was a darkness to Cooper. There was a dark side.
Yes, there was.
And so, that's what I think is so fascinating about The Return. And again, probably something that other filmmakers wouldn't have done if they were coming back to, if they were taking over and returning to Twin Peaks, right? There's this, a real exploration of stripping Cooper into as many parts and examining how those things play out, and and again, this show is moving towards a fully integrated Cooper again, and where does that get us? And then we'll talk about that, sort of down the road. But you're right. Right now, we're seeing these sort of distilled versions
Yes.
And the goodness that is coming out of Dougie, and infecting everyone around him with the goodness in the way that Mr. C's infecting all the people around him. And Richard Horn is an example of this, right? That he's infecting these people with the dark side. So I really found myself reflecting a lot on the different styles of masculinity being presented to us in different ways, from the Carls and the Hawks and the Sheriff Trumans through to the Chads, and all the way to the we don't see Mr. C in this episode, but to Richard at least too. So it was interesting to see all of those sort of things interacting with each other.
Yeah,
I gotta say, I love. Go ahead, Kevin.
Go right ahead.
Because I was gonna jump away from that target point and just say that I also love just the scene with Carl in the Resident, because I guess Carl rides to town every day, and the guy needed a ride, and just them shooting the shit.
Yeah.
And him being like, "Oh, I quit a year ago. I've been smoking every day for 75 years."
Yep. Yeah, Carl's a real one, dude. He is. He's a real one. But I mean, and it's really like just Harry Dean Stanton being Harry Dean Stanton at that point, honestly, which I love. It's so great. But no, there's so much to love in this season. I mean, and Lynch and Frost do talk about a lot of things. I think the masculinity thing is a very interesting point. But I think also when you look at especially the Rancho Rosa stuff in Las Vegas, it's sort of also a commentary on the current state of the suburbs, what they were in the 1950s and what they are now are two very different things.
Yeah.
There's a lot of commentary on that as well. And I think that's one of the great things about this season is they are able to talk about a lot of different things and not beat you over the head with it and not make it painfully obvious, but it's there. As they always say on Red Letter Media, you may not have noticed it, but your brain did. There's a lot of that in the Return. There's a lot of that in the Return, and I love that about the Return. I continue to, like, every year when I rewatch it, I just love it more and more and more. Like it's really amazing how it's grown on me so quickly, and part of that is the ability to be able to watch it right now. Of course, with Twin Peaks seasons 1 and 2, we didn't have the option of being able to just, unless you were recording it, you didn't have the option to just go back and start watching it once it was over. You had to wait around. Really, it was basically not until it hit Bravo that you were finally able to do that. But with the Return, being able to watch it like immediately right after I finished it, it's been really great. And there's so much for me as a Lynch fan. There is so much to enjoy in the Return. I think just in general, as a fan of good television, there is so much to enjoy in the Return. If you're not a Lynch fan, do I still think you could find enjoyment in it? Yeah, I do. I mean, I would recommend watching seasons 1 and 2, of course, first, but I think you could find something of worth to it. I can't imagine anybody watching it and being like, this is literally the worst thing I've ever seen. It's useless. It's pointless. It's worthless. I would never, ever recommend it. There are so many things. I guarantee there is something that will either make you laugh, make you cry, make you gasp. There will be something that will give you an honest to God reaction. And let's be honest, man, in today's climate, especially when you look at the realm of pop culture, when you look at streaming services and television, isn't it great when something actually does make you feel something, that actually like makes you give a damn about something? Like, even if it's one scene, isn't it great that it made you feel something? Like, Jesus, it just seems like everything now is just so safe and sanitized because it's got to fit into like the studio models to create a franchise.
It's got to hit the four quadrants
and stuff. And I love that Lynch and Frost were like, we know what our 4 quadrants are. They're the fan base of Twin Peaks, and it's weird, quirky, dark, and fun. And if you put all that together, that's our 4 quadrants. Fuck everything else. And I really appreciate that they're able to do that. But again, when you look at, and again, we talked about how this is such a shift in television at that time. And I'm not saying that there's no good television. I'm not saying that at all. But when you look at what is normally offered on a regular night by night basis on regular network television, and even on streaming services and stuff, most of it starts to feel kind of cookie cutter. This is something that will never, ever feel that way. Ever. And I love that about it. There are so few shows in this day and age that I could even say remind me of a Twin Peaks, Severance being one. That's a fantabulous show, and I would love, if you guys ever want to talk about that one, I'm happy to jump on and talk about it, because goddamn, there are layers to that show. But it's so great when you have something that makes you feel something. and that's, to me, every episode of this season has at least one scene that will do that for me. Usually every episode has multiple scenes that do that for me, but there's at least going to be one. So even if you're not a big David Lynch nerd, I still think there is something worth your time if you were to watch The Return after, of course, watching seasons 1 and 2 and Fire Walk with Me. That's mandatory for this to be in any way, shape, or form enjoyable. But if you do that, if you stick with it, I think you'd find a lot to love in The Return. That's
it's just a testament of there's a difference between you not liking or vibing with something, but you still recognize that there's talent in art in something. And also, like, if you go back and look at like what was the most watched things each Sunday night these episodes aired, I would say probably more than 75% of it people aren't talking about now. Like, they're talking about this.
I would put money on that. I guarantee it. Probably 95% of it, honestly, Cody. Let's be real.
Yeah.
Like, this show was definitely one of those, like, if you were watching it, by God, you know where you were when you watched it. You remember what you were feeling when you watched it, especially when we get to episode 8. Season Rise,
which we're getting very close to.
We're getting close. We're one episode away. But I will say this: I think to this day that episode 8 might be the single greatest hour of television I've ever watched in my life. The amount of payoff that was there for someone who was a huge Fire Walk with Me nerd in high school. The amount of payoff to the words convenience store, the amount of payoff to David Bowie's dialogue in Fire Walk with Me and the Missing Pieces, the amount of payoff that's there was, I mean, like, I was shaking. I was so excited. And literally, as soon as the episode ended, my best friend Brian, who's, I told you, was the one that got me into all things Lynch, we were on the phone for, like, I swear to God, almost 3 hours. I mean, just so stoked at what we had just seen. So I cannot wait to get to episode 8. It is, God, it's riveting television. If you're a fan of the franchise, it is like one of the most amazing.
But I'm gonna push back on that a little bit, because I mean, episode 8 is a thing all of its own for sure. But I just want to say, I've been struck rewatching this because I've taken a little bit of time off to come back. It's just how solid every episode is.
Oh, every episode's great. Jesus,
yeah.
This, right? Like, it's like, because none of it can exist without the rest of it, right? Like,
no,
you
I agree
couldn't
completely.
just sit and watch episode 8. It has to fit within the context of, like, just like you were actually saying, like, of, you know, the Fire Walk with Me and all of the things that were coming from there. There's even threads of it that tie into the original series. So I mean, I do love it. I think it's one of the most breathtaking episodes of television that there'll ever be. But I'm so struck rewatching these episodes on how much there is every part is what.
Oh yeah,
how David Lynch refers to them, right?
Valid.
They're art.
Yeah.
I think for me, it was just there was such an amount of payoff after having to wait, over 2 decades.
Right.
Of all the questions that were there, like, what the hell is he talking about a convenience store? Like, what the shit does that mean? Like, who are these people? And then suddenly it's like, oh my Christ, there it is. Like, it was like,
so convenience store originally comes from Mike talking in, is it the episode before they reveal the killer? I think is when we maybe.
It is.
Yeah, when they're interrogating him.
I think you say convenience store. I think
because he says, I mean it like it is, like it sounds. Yeah. And even there, because you're kind of like, what exactly is it? But then when David Bowie references it in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, it's just kind of like, oh shit, like this means something, right? Like it's the mashed potato sculpture in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This means something, like it does. Right. And so, like, finally, it's like suddenly there is this massive payoff. And for me, I think that's why episode 8, when we get to it, I will be like I was with Lost Highway. I'll just be like, let me talk.
Well,
'Cause I just love it so goddamn much.
there's a fan theory that I think Frost has hinted at, but you never would have heard Lynch. But there's
No,
a fan
he would not
theory
talk
of that
anything.
happens in part 8 that I'm interested to know what your guys' opinion is.
We will
when get
definitely have to talk
We'll-
shop
we'll-
on that. I'm
yeah,
all about
talk
that. All
about
about that.
You
Love
probably
it.
already know what I'm hinting at, but
I'm just gonna say this: as great as a film as Oppenheimer is, it couldn't touch Episode 8. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. It's all I'm gonna say. Could not touch it. Did not come close to the impact. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, this so getting back to this episode, it is very I appreciated how much Twin Peaks there was in it. Like,
There is so much.
literally
Yes.
set in Twin Peaks, because again, we haven't had as much of that from time to time, and as much as I love the other elements, I agree with
Oh,
you. I love
absolutely,
the
yeah.
stuff that's going on in Las Vegas too. It's also great to see the Twin Peaks stuff. We've got the sheriff station, we've got the Double R Diner, we've got the intersections. We see the town sort of growing more. We see there's just more of a. It just feels like it's much more bustling. It does feel dark as well, and
Yes.
tragic. There we see the trailer park from the even though it's not the same trailer park,
It's not the
new
same,
one,
but it is still the Fat
but
Trout.
still it is, exactly. So we've got it's just nice to feel like this episode was set in
But
Twin
I think
Peaks.
for me, like what I was saying earlier, like this is when it started to feel like Twin Peaks. It's not just that we have more time in Twin Peaks, but it's like even in the other places that we are, the vibe is starting to really shift into that Twin Peaks vibe. Like that Twin Peaks quirkiness, that Twin Peaks creepiness, it's starting to permeate into everything now, especially with the Las Vegas side. You get so much of the quirk. All of the good quirk.
Yeah,
is in
Janie
Las
E
Vegas.
scene could have easily been in the original series.
They all could have.
Yeah.
And they could have taken place
absolutely.
in Twin Peaks.
Well,
Like,
and the Ike the Spike could have been a
he
Yeah.
killer that
absolutely
came
could have
into
been there,
town.
yes. You could put
Yeah.
him in season 1 and have him connected to Jacques, and I'd have been
Yeah.
like, "Yep,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Why
Yeah.
not?"
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's such energy to it now. Like the Lynchian vibe, I guess, is really starting to kick in these other areas. And for me, like I said, if you're looking for that quirk, all that quirk is basically in every goddamn sequence in Las Vegas. Like it's just goddamn. Like what happened in Vegas doesn't necessarily stay in Vegas in this case, and I love it. I love it. I just, for me, every time I go back and watch The Return again, I'm so excited every time we show up in Las Vegas. And this episode, Janie E proves why that's always one of those places I love. Janie E is a force of nature. And it may be, I think Naomi Watts' better performances in Mulholland Drive, but I think my favorite performance of hers is Janie E in the Return. I mean, goddamn, she's breathtakingly great in Mulholland Drive and worthy of any kind of awards that she was nominated for. But her work in this is just, so, because it seems so effortless because she's just so damn good at it.
Yeah.
Like, man, she is so good.
Well, and it's so easy to get distracted by the force of nature that is Laura Dern later in the show. It's easy to push, Naomi Watts aside, and she shouldn't be, because she is also just such a remarkable part of the show, and one of the best parts of the show.
One of the best
overall.
parts. There's so much payoff with her and Dougie and Sonny Jim. I'm here for every fucking scene. Like it is just my favorite stuff in The Return is everything in Las Vegas.
And she is putting in the work too, because Janie is one of the characters that is there the most, right?
Yes.
Like she gets a lot of screen
from
time.
this point forward. She's like in every episode practically. I mean, like
she's been in a lot of them already.
Right.
Like she's
like really, she pushes real
profile.
big from here on out. Yeah, from here on out, she is like, she basically like kind of announces herself in this episode, and from here on out, buddy, she is full blown in your face. And I'm here for it. Love Naomi Watts. She is never hard on the eyes, but she is absolutely fantastic in her performance. Goddamn, like everything about her in this episode. That scene at the playground, you could just watch that scene by itself. It's so fucking great. Yeah. Like it's so funny. It's so well edited. It's so well put together. Everybody's performances are perfect. It's if someone were to tell me it's their single favorite scene of The Return, I'd be like, dude, I totally get
fair.
that. Like,
Yep,
you're not wrong.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. It's a great scene. It's a great scene. I have no heartburn with your pick on that. Not at all.
There's so many great scenes in this.
Yeah, dude, I don't think I could pick one, honestly. Like,
and like I said, I was glad to be
moments.
reminded of some of the ones I'd forgotten, like Red Scene that I completely forgotten, which is also a great moment. Very Lynchian, but also just very Twin Peaks.
Very.
Very.
And the goon in the background in that scene just holding the gun, he's doing so much without saying a word.
Yeah.
Like that's great, just scene acting.
You know, it's one of those things. Lynch just knows how to layer a shot. You know what I mean? Like, he just knows how to do that. And just having someone in the background just standing there, it's all you need to do.
He's just reacting to what's going on, and it works.
It just adds an element of a threat without saying a fucking word. But we know that this guy means business. We know that if Red were to say the word, this dude would shoot Richard in the face and not even think about it. Like, there would be.
We've talked about so many of the scenes that just have these little moments that are just so impactful. We talked about, Carl and the other resident, driving into town. We talked about like just these little things that, again, maybe sort of get forgotten when you're looking back over the whole series, but just resonate so strongly. And this episode, really, I was riveted all the way through. Like, when we put it on, I started watching it, I was like, oh yeah. And I just got so into it again. And, the one thing that's been hard for me, because I've been trying not to get ahead, because I want every episode to be fresh when I talk about it, is to not just go to the next episode.
Yes.
This one really had me. Like, when they got to the Roadhouse and the band started playing, I was like, oh, I don't want this to be over yet. And I just want to start into the next episode, but
it's hard on my end because I have Paramount Plus through Amazon.
Okay.
So as soon as your episode ends, it tries to autoplay that next one immediately. I'm like, no, not yet.
I'm watching my Blu-rays, so I don't get that.
That's what I'm doing too, sir. I got my Blu-rays ready to go.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I rewatched the pilot episode on the day that Lynch passed, and I got to watch the 4K edition of it. So I'll be watching I'll be watching episode 8 in 4K, and I'm very excited about watching it in 4K.
I bet that's going
to be stellar. I'm super stoked.
Yeah.
But no, I think this episode is one of those, it's the definition of all killer, no filler, and really, I think you can say that for every episode of The Return. There is no episode that's like a filler episode. Everything has a purpose. Everything is always building to something. Every scene is always building to something.
Which is saying something for 18 episodes.
For 18 hours of television, it sure is, man.
Because even for like a show like Showtime, the average season is usually like 12 or 13 episodes, and a lot of those shows, I feel like you're like, oh, this could have been like 3 or 4 episodes less.
Yeah, you watch these streaming shows, and you just, most of them, like, there's so many episodes that are just like, feel like they could have been shortened down. I'm watching a series with a friend, and I'm not going to mention what it is because I don't want to like yuck anyone's yum. And it's great. I'm actually really enjoying it. But there's so many times when I'm like, yeah, this episode has been like dwelling, and it really could have wrapped this up, whereas I don't feel like there's any part of The Return. And we haven't got to the sweeping scene. We'll get there. We'll talk about that, but it doesn't feel like, it never feels like when I remember when Lynch backed out of making this and then ended up coming back, and so much of the battle was over how many episodes he was going to get.
Yep.
And it's like, there's clear, once you see it, you're like, okay, now I get why this had to be 8.
Yeah, because wasn't it originally going to be 9 or 10?
He wanted 9 or something, yeah. And Lynch was like, I can't do it in 9, and he could not. Like, he could not have gotten
no.
You would have had to eliminate so many great like sublines of this plot that it would have been pointless. It really would have been hollow. And that would have been like, just it would have been awful to cripple Lynch's and Frost's creativity that way, but it would have done no service to the series at all. Like, at all. That would have been the worst thing they could have done.
And another thing is this, even though like the French named it like the best film of the year and stuff like that, called it an 18-hour movie, this is made for television, and it's something I don't know, because there's a lot of like directors who have been trying to get certain projects made and they don't get greenlit as a movie, so they make them a miniseries. I haven't watched it yet, but the Alfonso Cuarón Apple series, disclaimer, all the people I've heard that have watched it have complained like this should have just been a movie because he immediately the next episode begins where the last episode ends. Like it's like he should have just been able to make a 2-hour movie or whatever he wanted to do originally.
Yeah. No, you know what? Part of the reason why this one really motivated me to like want to start the next episode right away is because so much of this does lead into the next week. We're going to talk about the diary pages. You know, we're going to see, you know, we got the tease of Diane that I'm just so eager to like. So next episode is going to be, I know we're not quite at episode 8 yet, but I'm excited.
No, there's still a lot to talk about next episode. I'm stoked.
Yeah, like, I'm very excited. From here on out,
it's all killer, no filler, man. It is literally like, and not that it's been, you know, filler at any point.
No, but the train is going.
The train is officially hitting full speed. Yeah, we're right now, episode 7 is getting it right up to the top of the hill, and then episode 8 takes it right on over.
There you go.
Right nonstop. And I've told everybody, like, man, if you're not with this show after episode 8, just stop. just stop, because like it is not going to be for you if you're not.
Sort of like in season 1. If the end of episode 2 isn't for you, then you might as well
stop. Yeah, just be done. I can completely agree with that. So it is exciting to see this kind of television again, like to see Lynch return here again. And I mean, no pun intended, but it's really one of those things. Like when this was on, you know, like I said, every night when it was over on, you know, Sunday nights, I was calling my friend Brian, like it was our water cooler moment, basically. You know, it became water cooler television again for me. It really did.
It's the only television show I've watched in the last decade where after I watched an episode, I would watch the next one. I would watch that one again before the next one started again.
Yeah.
Like
absolutely. Yeah.
The first time I watched it through twice because I would. And you had a lot more than that. A couple episodes, like maybe 8, and the first 2 I watched a couple of times, maybe even at additional times. So, and I don't do that with most shows. I can't stomach most shows, you know, more than once because it's just getting through the plot, and I've already seen that part of the plot, right? And this is a completely different experience. Yeah.
But I would love to see, like, you know, this be like, I would love for more directors to get the chance to do something like The Return, you know what I mean? Where they can really just be kind of unfiltered. Like there are certain directors that would benefit from this kind of thing. Like I'm still, to this day, I'm still furious that Guillermo del Toro has never gotten to make his, you know, At the Mountains of Madness. Like I'm still frustrated that that's never happened. I would love for him to get to be able to do something like this, where it doesn't matter what it's rated. You can go as hard in the paint as you want to go with the creepiness, the darkness of it. You know, whatever gore you want to, you can go as far as you want to go, man. Like you just take it and run with it.
Honestly, surprised he hasn't tried to do that since winning the Oscar.
I would think if he's ever going to do it, now's the chance, because he's got an Oscar under his belt for he's got 2 also, because you got Pinocchio.
Yeah, because he won Best Animated Feature for Pinocchio.
I mean,
the thing with Del Toro, it feels like he has so many things he wants to do.
He does.
But true.
He talks about a billion things that he wants to do.
Like,
yes.
He even has like pre-production work done. You can even go look at the stuff.
I agree. I would be thrilled if he announced he was finally doing it. But
he almost got it made 15 years ago with Cameron and Cruz, but the studio said it had to be PG-13.
He was like, no. It can't be, and I love that.
You know, if his Frankenstein works and is another hit for Netflix, who knows? Maybe he'll do it there.
I'd be all about that, because he'd have the budget, he'd have the ability to do whatever kind of visuals he wanted to do to really bring it to life. So I'm hoping that I would love to see more directors get the shot that Lynch got with Twin Peaks: The Return. Like he was able to really swing for the fences. You know, it's like, you know, like Terry Gilliam is one of those directors that I would love to see get this kind of treatment, right? Like, because it just seems like after Brazil, and it didn't do well, like he just never had, other than 12 Monkeys, he never had the budget he really needed to do what he really wanted to do. And he's one of those directors that is so visually impressive and is always doing something that is interesting to watch. Even if I don't like the overall film, it's visually interesting. Like it is tonally interesting. I would love for directors like him and Del Toro, who are very much like Lynch. They create visuals and they create a vibe. Like they really do. And I love directors who can do that. I would love for them to get the chance to do something like Twin
I
Peaks.
think part of also Gilliam's issues is his personality.
He's
not.
abrasive. Sure, he's
Yeah,
abrasive.
he's
I
not.
mean,
He's not as lovable like Guillermo and David
right.
Lynch.
Yeah,
But
like
I don't need to get along with him. Just let him make the damn movie. You know, like I'm
yeah,
just
it's
saying.
not like with Lynch where everybody talks about what a doll he is to work with.
Now, but the actors who work with Gilliam like him. It's the producers
Yeah.
who don't him because
Okay.
he's so demanding of his final edit. But the actors all, there's a reason why they're willing to go back and do the shit they've done for him.
Well,
But
and some do. We're getting an even longer Avatar next time. Like
God,
it's going to
yeah.
be even longer than the last one. Yay!
Well,
which
and
is already
someone
so long.
commented when I posted something. They're like, "And the only person that's gonna watch it is Cameron." I'm like, "Well, now the last two Avatar movies made $1 billion, so I'm pretty sure someone's gonna watch it."
Someone's going to watch it all the way through.
That's one of those like I'll wait till it's streaming so I can watch it in settings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't. It's not like Return of the King extended edition, right? Like I'm not that invested in the Avatar universe. As a matter of fact, I'm starting to resent it because it's keeping Cameron away from other projects I'd like to see him work on. So like I'm just kind of like. Cameron,
he's only directed 2 movies in the 21st century, and they're both Avatar movies.
Yeah. I'd like you to get back over here to Alita Battle Angel.
He did a
we
Titanic
need to do some sequels for that, right?
He did a Titanic documentary too, didn't he? In this
the one where he actually went underwater and shit. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
really great.
He did 2 documentaries between
the Abyss.
Titanic and Avatar.
I saw that in IMAX 3D, and it was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. Like it's startlingly good. Right. And again, it's just he's one of those directors that I just want him to quit making Avatar and go make other cool shit, right?
But he seems to be obsessed with it and seems to be
this is White Whale. It's absolutely
good
his
for
White
him.
Whale.
And I don't hate the Avatar movies. I just don't get excited about them. And
they're
going to be longer. I'm just like, oh,
I'm just
they're technically impressive, and they're as I'm not going to say they're well written, but they're well structured. I'll say that, like from a storyboard, like from point A to point B.
I wish that more directors got. I guess it's because he's made 3 of the biggest films of all time, so he gets to do this. But I wish more directors got the kind of freedom that they got. And the fact, though, that David Lynch, of all people, got this freedom is a little bit of a miracle that we should just all be thankful for. As much as it feels like we live in the stupidest timeline sometimes, there are things like this that make me think, okay, it's not all bad. We got an 18-hour series from Lynch and Frost that were able to do exactly what they wanted.
Yes.
And we are all so lucky for it. And I can't wait
benefit.
For episode 7. When are we gonna talk about episode 7?
Oh, let's see here. I got a couple of busy weekends coming up. So I'm looking at April 13th.
April 13th could work for me. That
should be
before
okay
Easter. So
because I have I don't like to do them back to back unless we have to. So, but 2 weeks is my wife's birthday, and then I have a nephew's wedding to go to. So that looks like a good weekend.
The 13th will work. That's fine.
Yeah, I think that works for me too. That sounds great. And like I said, I'm pretty excited to get there because I think it's going to be a fun one to talk about and a fun one to rewatch. So I'm excited to
absolutely
because there's going to be things that I've forgotten, like there was in this episode, that'll make me go, "Oh yes, this part," or So I'm excited to rewatch it again.
Well, because there's so much in each of these episodes, of course, there's going to be something you forget because it's like it's
there's
so massive.
So much space in my brain.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent, guys.
Really, because from here on out, every episode is so packed. I mean, like there is so much to talk about that. Yeah, I'm fine going just episode by episode at this point. Because God, there's so much. These next 2 in particular are chock full. I mean, genuinely chock full.
Great.
I mean, episode 8 is basically 2 separate episodes in one. So like, it definitely takes time. I'm very okay from here on out, just the one episode per podcast because goddamn, there's a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Because I couldn't imagine, even though they were aired together, I couldn't imagine talking about 17 and 18 at the same time. We'd be here all day.
Nope.
So
there's no way. Like that. That there is so much going on in those 2 episodes. There is no way in hell. I wouldn't do that to myself. I'd have no voice.
Those are probably, to be honest, those are probably the episodes I have watched the most of the entire thing. I think I've watched through those 2 episodes more times
That's
than
fair.
any of the others. Even
That's
episode
fair.
8. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, very excited for 7. Thank you guys.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure,
of
man.
course. It's always a pleasure to talk to you guys. I love it. And I hope you guys have a great weeks ahead.
Yeah,
All right.
you too, man. Seriously, take it easy. Be safe. Colin, just remember, not all of us want you to be the 51st state. Just
Yeah,
please know.
no offense that we don't want to be the 51st
No,
state.
it's the
We don't want you to be either. Don't
No,
do
we don't
it.
want you to be, because we love having you guys as awesome neighbors. So please know that not everybody is MAGA down here. Not everybody thinks it's a good idea.
We know that it's there's a small portion. Like, I think they did a poll and it was in the teens of Canadians that do like the idea, but that's how small it is. It's in the teens.
Good.
So
Thank Christ.
But it's
yeah, thank God most of you are Mike Myers' sentiment that Canada is not for sale.
It is not for sale, nor should it be.
That's right.
Because God only knows what's going to happen with Greenland. So Jesus, man. Yeah.
No kidding. So, but yeah, no, I appreciate that. Definitely appreciate the reference. And I mean, there was a Canada reference in this episode tonight.
Yes.
So
yes, there was.
About where the drugs are coming from. I thought that was kind of funny, just in terms of this whole like fentanyl discussion.
Yes, right.
I did have a laugh at that moment.
No, it's definitely, no, that's funny as shit. That really is valid point there. That's hilarious. But no, just please know we love you, man. We love Canada. We love you. We love you guys being your own independent, awesome things, man.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Know that you're with like-minded people every time you're on this, buddy.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you guys very much, and we will be talking again in a few weeks. And
it'll be great as always.
Awesome.
Take care, guys.
All
be
right,
safe,
guys. You guys have a good night.
You too.
Bye.